Juice boxes used to feel like a symbol of safety, something parents could toss into a lunchbox without thinking twice, something colorful, fruity, and innocent. But what if I told you that many of those same drinks have been quietly tied to contamination scares, toxic metals, and health alerts that never made the evening news? The labels still say natural, the ads still show smiling kids, but the truth is far less sweet. Over the past year, more than 100,000 juice pouches and bottles have been recalled across the country. Lead, arsenic, bacteria, even mold. The list of contaminants keeps growing, and yet these products keep showing up in grocery aisles, daycare centers, and school vending machines. The most disturbing part? You'll never hear about most of it. These recalls are buried behind quiet PDFs, press statements, and phrases like "out of an abundance of caution," while parents keep buying the same brands that regulators already flagged. So in today's video, we're uncovering the 7 juice brands that were never as safe as they seemed. And once you see what's been hiding inside your child's favorite juice pouch, you might never look at a lunchbox the same way again. Number 1. Evergreen Orchard Farm. Evergreen Orchard Farm sounds harmless. The name alone paints a picture of clean fields, healthy trees, and freshly pressed fruit. Their pouches look just as pure, labeled with phrases like "farm fresh," "made from real fruit," and "no preservatives." But this year, that picture started to crumble when the company recalled more than 22,000 pouches of juice over contamination, concerns the public barely heard about. The recall wasn't for flavoring errors or label typos. It was because the products may have been bottled without verified pasteurization, meaning bacteria could have survived inside sealed pouches shipped nationwide. Pasteurization is what keeps harmful pathogens like E. coli, salmonella, and listeria from reaching your child's drink. Without it, every sip becomes a roll of the dice. And yet, those pouches were still sold in supermarkets, school cafeterias, and convenience stores before anyone intervened. The affected varieties included Korean pear, grape, and jujube juice, all marketed directly toward families and children. The FDA later classified the recall as a Class 2 risk, meaning the drinks could cause temporary or medically reversible health consequences. That's the polite way of saying kids could get sick, but not everyone would know why. Because the products weren't recalled until weeks after distribution, many of those pouches were already in lunchboxes and refrigerators across the country. Evergreen Orchard Farm isn't a household name, which makes this even more concerning. Smaller brands like these often rely on contract facilities to handle bottling, packaging, and distribution. That creates more room for error, more steps where oversight slips, and more hands involved in the final product. The company claimed it voluntarily recalled the items out of caution, but the truth is simple. If regulators hadn't stepped in, those unpasteurized pouches would still be on shelves today. So before you trust the words farm or orchard on a label, remember this recall, because sometimes the biggest threat in your pantry isn't what's added to your child's drink. It's what's missing from the process that makes it safe in the first place. Number 2, Martinelli's. For decades, Martinelli's has been the gold standard of apple juice. The glass bottle, the golden color, the wholesome promise of family-owned since 1868. It's the brand you see in school lunches, holiday tables, and toddler snack trays across America. But earlier this year, even Martinelli's came under fire when thousands of bottles were recalled for something that sounds harmless but isn't, a toxin called patulin. Patulin is produced by certain molds that grow on fruit, especially apples stored too long before processing. It doesn't change the color or smell of the juice, and you can't taste it, but once it's there, it's there. The FDA warns that consuming high levels can cause nausea, vomiting, and gastrointestinal distress, and long-term exposure has been linked to more serious effects on the immune and nervous systems. That's not what parents expect when pouring a glass of juice for their kids. In March 2025, Martinelli's voluntarily pulled back over 7,000 cases of 10-ounce bottles distributed across 28 states. The toxin levels were discovered after routine testing flagged contamination that slipped past the company's usual checks. The affected bottles came from a single production lot, but it was enough to shake confidence in a brand that built its reputation on purity and quality. The recall was filed quietly, handled with a brief notice on the FDA website. No press coverage, no national alert, no warning stickers in stores. What makes this case troubling is how invisible the danger is. Patulin doesn't spoil the juice. It doesn't look cloudy, smell sour, or fizz. Parents had no way to know their healthy apple juice was carrying a toxin created by rotting fruit. And Martinelli's isn't some newcomer cutting corners. This is one of the oldest juice producers in the country, with resources, technology, and testing far beyond small local farms. If a brand like this can fail at such a basic safety standard, what does that say about the rest of the industry? The recall was labeled voluntary, but that doesn't undo the risk. Contamination this kind of subtle doesn't just happen overnight. It suggests a breakdown in sourcing oversight, a gap between marketing and reality. Because when pure apple juice hides a toxin you can't see or taste, that wholesome family image starts to feel like false advertising. And Martinelli's wasn't alone, because even after decades of lessons and regulation, one of the world's most recognizable juice brands continues to dominate store shelves while quietly feeding kids more sugar and additives than any soda ever could. Number 3, Capri Sun. Capri Sun is practically a childhood symbol. The silver pouch, the bendy straw, the splash of bright fruit on the front. It feels safe, nostalgic, and innocent. But behind that shiny packaging lies one of the most misleading drinks ever marketed to kids. Capri Sun's biggest secret isn't contamination or toxins, it's deception. Because for decades, the brand has convinced parents that it's juice, when in reality, most of it isn't. Take a closer look at the label. The majority of Capri Sun varieties contain less than 10% actual fruit juice. The rest is filtered water, sugar, and flavoring compounds designed to taste like fruit. Some formulas include additives like citric acid, high fructose corn syrup, and artificial flavorings that mimic the real thing but offer little nutritional value. What's worse, that sugar content can rival or exceed that of a soft drink. In some flavors, a single pouch packs more sugar than a child's recommended daily limit. Yet the packaging still shouts words like natural, real fruit taste, and made with goodness. Health watchdogs have been calling out Capri Sun for years, pointing to misleading advertising that preys on parents who think they're choosing the better option. But beyond the sugar lies a more physical risk. Parents across the US and Europe have reported mold growth inside pouches caused by tiny air leaks that allow microorganisms to thrive. Kraft Heinz, the parent company, has acknowledged this risk multiple times, even issuing a voluntary recall in 2022 after cleaning solution accidentally mixed into production lines, tainting thousands of Capri Sun wild cherry pouches. That recall involved more than 5,700 cases, tens of thousands of drinks that had already been distributed nationwide. The contaminated batches contained diluted sanitizer used for equipment cleaning, and many families didn't realize what was happening until their kids noticed a strange taste. The company quietly pulled the product, blaming a mixing error. But that event exposed something bigger: how fragile quality control becomes when profit depends on pumping out millions of pouches per week. Capri Sun continues to dominate lunchboxes because of nostalgia, not safety. Parents remember their own childhoods and assume that what was once familiar must still be fine. But between the sugar overload, mold incidents, and quality lapses, the brand represents a bigger problem in the food industry, one where fun packaging hides chemical shortcuts and health trade-offs. Number 4, Wanabana Now. If there's one recall that shook parents to their core, it was this one. Wanabana sold fruit puree pouches that looked perfectly innocent. Smiling fruit mascots, colorful packaging, labels like apple cinnamon, and naturally delicious. They were designed to feel safe, healthy, and convenient for toddlers. But by late 2023, the FDA traced a series of alarming blood test results in children back to one thing: lead contamination in these pouches. Lead isn't a minor ingredient issue, it's a neurotoxin. Even small amounts can cause irreversible harm to developing brains. The FDA investigation found that multiple batches of Wanabana's apple cinnamon puree contained dangerously high levels of lead and chromium, and the contamination was widespread enough to trigger a national health alert. Children from several states tested positive for elevated lead levels after consuming these pouches. Some were hospitalized. Many parents didn't know what was happening until the FDA connected the dots weeks later. The company's response was quick on paper, but slow in reality. They announced a voluntary recall of all apple cinnamon pouches. Not just a single lot, but every product sold under that name. Still, by the time the recall went public, the pouches had already reached schools, pantries, and daycare centers across the country. Parents who had been trying to feed their kids something healthier than candy had unknowingly been giving them one of the most toxic substances on Earth. The source of the contamination was traced to imported cinnamon powder used in the puree. But this raises the bigger question: how did such a critical ingredient pass through every checkpoint, every inspection, and every label verification? The answer lies in cost cutting. Wanabana, like many companies that sell fruit snacks for kids, relies on overseas suppliers to keep prices low. And when oversight falls apart halfway across the world, children in the United States end up paying the price. The FDA later found that similar contamination had spread to private label products manufactured in the same facilities. So even if the pouch in your pantry didn't say Wanabana, the risk might still have been there under a different brand name. The real horror is that parents had no way of knowing which pouches were safe and which weren't. Number 5, Bolthouse Farms. Bolthouse Farms built its reputation on health. Smoothies, carrot juice, protein blends, the kind of drinks that sound like wellness in a bottle. For years, parents trusted the brand as a cleaner alternative to sodas and flavored drinks, something that belonged in gym bags and lunch coolers alike. But that image shattered when Bolthouse Farms was linked to one of the most chilling juice contamination cases in modern history. Back in 2006, the company recalled its 100% carrot juice after several people were hospitalized with botulism, a rare but potentially fatal illness caused by the Clostridium botulinum toxin. The symptoms were terrifying: blurred vision, muscle paralysis, and respiratory failure. The CDC reported that multiple victims required mechanical ventilation just to stay alive. The investigation found that improperly stored or inadequately pasteurized bottles had allowed the bacteria to grow in sealed containers, turning a healthy juice into a lethal risk. Botulism isn't your everyday contamination. It's one of the deadliest toxins known to science. A single sip of contaminated juice can lead to paralysis within hours. What made the Bolthouse case so disturbing was how easily it could have been prevented. Temperature controls, batch testing, and storage protocols exist precisely to stop this from happening. But when production ramps up and profit margins tighten, corners get cut, and safety becomes optional. The company survived the fallout, rebranded, and pushed forward with marketing centered on freshness and vitality. But even after that crisis faded from public memory, the lesson never fully sank in. Bolthouse's reliance on cold chain distribution means its products are still highly perishable, and without perfect refrigeration from plant to shelf, the risk of bacterial growth remains. Unlike shelf-stable juices, these drinks depend on constant temperature control. One broken link in the chain can turn a bottle from healthy to hazardous. Bolthouse's recall was a wake-up call that the industry ignored, because if a company selling pure carrot juice could end up distributing a neurotoxin, what about the ones pushing trendy blends made with fewer safeguards? Every natural juice on the shelf wants to sell you health in a bottle, but Bolthouse proved how fragile that promise really is. And as shocking as botulism sounds, another company managed to create a disaster even bigger, one that forced the entire juice industry to rethink its definition of fresh. Number 6, Odwalla. You see, before the era of cold-pressed juice bars and influencer smoothies, there was Odwalla. The brand built its empire on one idea: fresh, never pasteurized. It marketed unprocessed fruit juice as more natural, more nutritious, and more honest than the rest. People loved it. Cafeterias, airports, and organic markets couldn't stock it fast enough. But that same promise of freshness turned deadly in 1996, when Odwalla's unpasteurized apple juice became the source of a massive E. coli O157:H7 outbreak that killed a child and sickened dozens of others across several states. It began quietly, reports of children suffering from severe stomach pain, diarrhea, and kidney failure. Within days, doctors noticed a pattern. Every patient had recently consumed Odwalla juice. Investigators found that the apples used in production weren't properly sanitized, and because Odwalla refused to pasteurize its products, the deadly bacteria survived the bottling process and went straight into store shelves. The company had gambled on flavor over safety, and people paid with their lives. Odwalla's leadership initially downplayed the problem, calling the outbreak an isolated incident. But as hospitalizations mounted, they were forced to issue a nationwide recall of more than 13 million bottles. The fallout was swift and devastating. The brand's reputation collapsed overnight, and the company was fined heavily for violating federal safety standards. The tragedy became one of the most important food safety lessons of the decade. The proof that fresh doesn't always mean safe. The most haunting part is how easily it could have been prevented. Pasteurization kills pathogens without changing the flavor in any meaningful way. But at the time, Odwalla thought avoiding it gave them an edge in marketing, a raw and real appeal that resonated with health-conscious consumers. The truth was far darker. The lack of heat treatment created a perfect pathway for bacteria to survive and spread. And when you're dealing with pathogens as lethal as E. coli O157:H7, one unwashed apple is all it takes to poison an entire batch. In the years that followed, Odwalla switched to flash pasteurization and stricter testing, but the damage was already done. The brand eventually faded away after being acquired by Coca-Cola and later discontinued altogether. It serves now as a case study in what happens when good intentions collide with bad science, and how chasing freshness without accountability can destroy more than a company's reputation. Now, before you pack another lunchbox or grab a drink from the cooler, think about what you've just seen. 7 brands that promised purity, health, and safety, yet ended up recalled, contaminated, or exposed for deception. Each one proves how fast healthy can turn dangerous when profit comes first. Labels mean nothing when companies hide behind words like natural and fresh. So next time you see those smiling fruits on a pouch, look closer, because behind the colors and slogans, safety isn't guaranteed. If today opened your eyes, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next deep dive.